Welcome to Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes for future generations. Today is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. We're talking with James Jimi Threet, who served in the United States Army. So good afternoon, Jimmy. Good to have you here.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to be anywhere, right?
Right?
All right. We're going to start out with, the basics. So when and where were you born?
I was born in Anderson, Indiana, and I was born in 1980 on April 6th, which was oddly enough Easter Sunday.
Oh,
And anybody who knows me knows how ironic that really is.
I'm sure we're going to find that out during this conversation, aren't we? So where is Anderson, Indiana?
It is about 30 minutes northeast of Indianapolis.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you lived there like most of your childhood, or were you just born there and moved someplace else?
No, I lived there. So I lived between there and Pendleton, which is just the next town over, all the way through high school, and then a little bit after high school. So.
All right. Well, tell me what was it like growing up? Did you have siblings? What were some of the highlights of your childhood?
Um, I had I had a half brother. He passed in 2005. He was in a car accident, and then my sister. I still have a half sister, and they're both much older. I was through a second marriage, actually a third marriage. Family secret. That's second.
All right.
Second.
It's not a secret anymore, Jimmy.
So yeah, my brother was 10 years older than me, and my sister was 7 years older than me.
So for all intents and purposes, you were almost like an only child.
Kind of, yeah, yeah. So I kind of got the a little bit of that being my dad's only child.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about your dad since you were his only child. What's your memories of your dad?
Um, my mom and dad divorced when I was 4 years old, and he was around town for a couple years, and I think probably when I was about 7 or 8, he moved to Tennessee, and then he basically just became the guy on the end of the phone for pretty much the majority, to even to this day. Um, I think I saw him for the first time in 8 years, 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, we talk on the phone sometimes, but a lot of times it's not very connected to the guy. Like I barely know him. So, yeah, yeah. But I don't blame him
Right.
really because his dad was murdered by his mistress.
Oh,
So, like those generational things that just kind of come down the pipeline. I get it. Luckily I decided to change that, and I'm very close with my daughter. Like
oh,
very close. So,
that's good. Sometimes, it's interesting. Like sometimes we learn the wrong things from our parents, and sometimes we learn how not to do things from our parents, and it just depends on how we take it, right?
the same could go for leadership in the military
Yeah.
too, because
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I
absolutely.
learned a lot of wrong things.
100%. Most of my junior enlisted time was spent learning how not to lead.
Hmm.
I'll give you that one. What about your
Yeah.
mom? Tell me a little about your mom and maybe your stepdad if you're inclined.
Yeah, my mom worked a lot. She was she worked really hard to keep us going, and like we were definitely in the poverty, in a poverty line, most of growing up. And we struggled some, well, a lot, but it still was. I had my sister a lot too, so that was one thing. Growing up, she and I were very close, and then I had grandparents. So my my mother's father and my dad's mother were my two closest grandparents, and a lot of who I became, or who I am now, is because of those two people. Um, but going back to my mom, she was kind of a hands-off parent,
Mhm.
and it's a discussion we've actually had as adults, and it was nothing shy of a miracle that I kind of had the foresight to see the writing on the wall where my life was going and do something about it, because joining the military was that for me, you know.
Yeah.
And you meet a lot of those people in the military, people in my situation,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well, we always in our family like to say we were feral children because we were latchkey kids. Mom and dad weren't.
yep,
Parents were divorced. Mom was working. You survived.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm the back end of Gen X,
Right.
1980, and and very much latchkey kid, not a whole lot of adult supervision, and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's like I would look back at the generations before them and everything and how trends are made, and like I find most people my age had parents like that, just very kind of hands off, that latchkey kid thing, and why that is, who knows, but um I'm sure somebody knows. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I ain't mad about it. I had a lot of fun, and I
Uh-huh.
survived it all, so that was cool. Because
Right.
I probably should
Right. Right.
have.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So, what was school like for you?
Uh, you know, I did okay in school. Um, I had some years where I did really well, like I was in beta and stuff like that. I think I was like fifth and sixth grade. And then I just stopped caring. Like hormones kicked in and I just like I started to see school for what it was.
Mhm.
Even before people were talking about school being an institution, I felt very much even as a young kid that it was an institution. And by junior high, I was like, this is utter bullshit. Like like, you know, and I remember graduating school and I had a college recruiter come to my house and she was like, because I graduated high school with like a 1.8 GPA.
Yeah.
Like the army was probably the only branch that was going to take me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe the Marines, but probably not. I think they like to dumb them down after they get in.
it's it's entirely possible. Comes from eating all those crayons.
Most of my family are Marines, so I love giving them the most possible shit I can. So
Jimmy, I got to tell you, I feel like we were like separated at birth or something because I grew up in a Marine Corps family. My stepdad was a Marine. So very similar. Like I feel like I have the right to give Marines a little bit of crap
yeah,
because I grew up around that, and
yeah.
they weren't pleased when I joined the Navy. But yeah, I mean, very similar background. So I just it's kind of remarkable. So this recruiter shows up and she's like, "Hey, you should go to college."
Oh yes. So she's like, why did you? She asked me, she's like, why do you think you did so poorly in school? And I said, because school's bullshit. I was like, I was like, especially high school. Like I tell my daughter that she's about to finish school, and I'm like, just get through it. Just get through it. I'm like, it's you're checking the block in your life. I was like, just look at it at that and just get through it. She makes good grades.
Right.
But for me, like I would my teachers would tell me they're like, "You're one of the smartest kids in this class." Because the only reason why I got the GPA I did is because I was a test taker. I could just take the test.
Hmm.
I never did homework, and I would tell my teachers, I'd be like, "Listen, you've got me for like 1 hour a day. If you can't get all that shit done in 1 hour, you think I'm trying to get high out of the the railroad tracks after high school or after school ends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hang out with my friends and be a kid. You got me for 8 hours a day. You can't you know like I'm stuck in this life right here, and it's very regimented and stuff. Joining the mil If that shouldn't give you an idea of like how joining the military was kind of an escape, because I what did I do? I went right into something that's even more regimented than high school.
Right. They got you for more than 8 hours a day. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
Exactly. It can- but didn't do very well in school.
Mhm.
In high school, I should say. Once I got to college, like I graduated with honors and stuff. Like I got a master's degree and all that stuff. But also, it was a time it was a time in history where, like, literally, they called it the dumbing down of America, and like I feel like it would just wasn't. It didn't seem like it really paid off to to like be intelligent or show intelligence in school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Free thinking was very kind of scoffed at even in school,
It was frowned upon.
Yeah, and it's just like this doesn't make sense to me, like, and so, like I said, I kind of saw school for what it was even at a very young age.
Yep. Yep.
And went in the, 17, I was still 17 and I joined the military.
So you graduated and went right into the military.
Oh yeah, like 2
Yeah.
weeks after that, and I was in the reserves first, the National Guard first,
Uh-huh.
and then I went active duty. After about a year of National Guard, I was like, this is stupid. Like, what am I doing? Like, I come here 1 weekend a month and look at porn magazines all day, and that's literally what we did because there was nothing to do.
Yeah. I came into the National Guard in 1999, and we were kind of on the back end of that era, right? Because we were getting into the point where a lot of shit was about to happen. And
Yeah.
I remember like there was this my very first few months in were what you're describing, and then all of a sudden it was training, it was equipment, it was all kinds of crazy stuff. So when were you in the National Guard?
So I joined in '97.
Okay.
Did a couple drills, and then I went to basic training. Like literally, I graduated high school, and I think I gave myself about 2 weeks before I jumped on the plane and flew to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Oh, love that place.
Oh yeah, it's lovely.
Oh boy. So
Um,
so yeah, how was that for you? What was boot camp like?
you know what? For a kid that had like no discipline in their life or anything like that, and like really never had anybody like scream and yell at me or anything. Like I didn't grow up in that kind of household, like where people were yelling and stuff like that. Um, but it I did well. I learned a lot of lessons in that. Like one of the very first lessons I learned in the military, there's a few of them, but even in basic training, it was like above average. That's where you want to be.
Right.
Above average. Don't be average because then you're just kind of, you know, you don't stand out at all. You don't want to be below average because that's not good. You don't want to be this guy up here because everybody, especially in the military, they're gonna try to cut you down at the knees and stab you in the back as much as possible. So just be above average. Cause a little trouble here and there, and
Yeah, no
but
doubt.
you know, but that's good. And the other one was always look like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing when you're supposed to be doing it, and nobody will ask you any questions. And I call that the serial killer effect. So,
it's like the old adage where like if you work in corporate America, if you walk around with a clipboard and a pencil and
yes,
look like you belong there,
yeah,
they just leave you alone.
yeah. These days, you could throw on a little was those reflective vests and just walk into anything.
Yep, and you could start ordering people around and they would just do.
I know.
I've seen it on TikTok. It really happens. So do you think part of it, like when you got to basic training, I mean, you figured it out pretty quickly, but do you think there was a party that was kind of craving that sort of discipline that the military offered or not?
You know,
Honest question.
no, no, it's very, yeah, it's great. It's a great question. When I was a kid, when other kids were reading Dr. Seuss and Clifford and shit like that, I was reading books on warfare, and I loved like G.I. Joe, and I thought that was just the coolest stuff, and we always played things like cops and robbers or called it guns or whatever. And like we were so broke, like literally one of the guns that we used was just a sideways turned GI Joe jet. He just held like a gun. I mean, that was just our imaginations. We were young. I mean, we were young and poor as fuck, you know.
Yeah.
And so like I always kind of glorified that. Like that was the era that um Platoon came out, and all those war movies and stuff, like the ones that are just so, people still refer to these movies all the time.
Right.
And so, and that was Vietnam stuff. And even in high school, I took a class on Vietnam. I knew what I was getting into
Hmm.
because if anybody's pretty salty, it's fucking Vietnam vets, man. They were they were done pretty badly.
Yeah. They were done
So
dirty.
yeah, and I knew what I was going into. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that I don't more. It's not that era for me. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Um, but I did always idolize that the military and stuff like that. So yeah, I did have this. I think we all have the idea of what the military is, and then we get in it and we're like, oh,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
what it is. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. So you make it through boot camp, and then uh do you go to AIT right from there?
yes,
Okay. And
yeah.
what was your MLS?
So I was a machinist back
Okay.
then, and it was a 44 Echo, and now I think they're like 92. Gulfs or something like that. I
Hmm.
don't know. Um, and I love that job because I did that. I did voc school my senior year. I did vocational school, and so I did a machine course. So there was nothing I had to learn in that school. It was great, and um, I just thought, it'd be cool to be a machinist in the military, and um, it was kind of a bad job.
It wasn't what you thought it was going to be.
No, no, I did a lot of welding and stuff, and
Yeah.
I learned a lot of stuff. I learned how to take jack shit and to turn it into something,
Uh-huh.
because that's what you do as a machinist, and that's specifically what you do as a machinist in the military. You know,
Yeah.
you you become a problem solver on a scale that would blow most people's minds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I always liked about that kind of job. So
Okay. Now, how long?
we'll lead into how important that is soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can tell you it was that kind of thinking that saved my bacon more than once on deployment, because you had people that could get shit done with nothing. So
Yeah.
I completely get it. So how long was your AIT for you? Was that a couple
Five
of?
and a half months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you pack up all your cool stuff and you come back home.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
And then
And I was home for a year.
enjoyed your weekends. I understand.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just kind of did that thing for a year, and then you were like, "Screw this! I'm going active duty." How did that all unfold?
Well, so a little back history on my hometown. There was actually an HBO documentary made on this town about back in the 90s when all the industries started outsourcing and going overseas and stuff. And like this town just almost overnight went to shit. Went from this bustling town that like we had a big GM plant there, and during the wars and stuff they would make weapons, so like this town has some places that have like bomb shelters and stuff because it was like they thought there might be nuclear strike, and at certain times, and then I'm telling you, overnight it's like a crack town, and people can't sell houses. Nobody wants to live there. I think some of the housing market got down into like you could probably buy a house for like $30,000 there,
Wow.
and like a nice house too, because there's just they couldn't get rid of them. Um, but growing up in that environment and living, you know, so the one going back to like the military and stuff, and also being a machinist and
Hmm.
things like that. Just kind of gives you a little history on they it's I'll tell you the documentary is called Dirty Driving. If you want to look that up.
I'm gonna
My
check it
bro-
out.
my brother who died that year, and my cousin's one of the main characters. His name's Brandon, and he's like one of the main characters of the show. And so, yeah, it's kind of what I had to go back to when I was in the National Guard. I
So,
was like,
so it was kind of a double whammy, right? If I'm getting the picture right here, because I know here everything revolves around the automotive industry. Like if the automotive industry gets a cold, everyone sneezes. So you come back. If I'm reading this right, you come back. You're in the National Guard. You're not really happy with the Guard anyway, but then there's really nothing there for you to do.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's
And
a
most people just kind of fall into, that life. It's one of those towns that just swallows people,
yeah, yeah.
And where I lived on the other side in Pendleton was a little better because we were a little bit more connected towards the towns that were successful.
Uh huh.
So it was a little better, but still very much that was how I was born and raised, and kind of just how things were. Um, and I'm back there, and I'm there for a year, and I'm like I'm looking for a job, and I'm drilling and stuff like that, and it's just not working out. And plus, honestly, when I went on active duty, like a lot of my friends and I said one of the best things we ever did was leave home. You
Right.
know, one of the best things we could ever do for ourselves is leave. And a lot of people that stayed, they did great for themselves. They lived very happy lives and stuff like that. And I'm happy for them. I mean, because they're great. These are still my friends. Um, but that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And that was my personal choice. It's just how I wanted to be. It's just what I wanted to do. And the military was kind of an outlet for that as well. And then obviously going on active duty would not land me being in Indiana, you know, waiting to go to Bosnia or Kosovo, and then later on go back to back rotations of Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. So active duty was definitely a much better choice.
So you went to the recruiter, you got your release from the guard. It sounds like where'd you go first? Like,
Fort Benning, Georgia.
man, you're just hitting all the high spots.
I
Although
know.
although I'm a big
I mean,
fan of Fort Benning, I got to be honest with you. I love going there, but I was never stationed at Benning, so maybe that's
yeah.
why.
Yeah. Well, the Benning's cool because it's not in a terrible location. I mean, it's what is it, Chattahoochee Valley, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
But you're not far from the mountains. You're not far from Atlanta. I used to go to Atlanta every weekend. I was a big raver, so I go to I go to raves and concerts and stuff. And honestly, I had way more friends in Atlanta than I ever did on base.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And are
and
these non-military friends like you, or are these military friends that just happen to be in
um,
Atlanta?
some of them were military, but a couple of my friends from high school moved to Atlanta, so we hung out, and then I had other friends and going to raves. I mean, you just meet a lot of people. Everybody at those things are super cool, and I grew up going to raves.
Yeah,
Started going when I was like 14. So
it's kind of your
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. So
The music's
yeah,
awesome though. I'm not
it
gonna
is.
lie. I just love I like the whole like continuous music
Yeah,
that goes on. I'm not a raver myself. I'm a few years older, um, but I love that music.
yeah.
Maybe it's because I like disco music, and I think it's very similar.
I think y'all up in Michigan. What is that? Forest Festival? I think.
I don't
It's like
know.
a 3-day rave that's up there. My buddy's going this year. He asked me if I wanted to go, and I was like, we already got tickets to some other stuff. And I was like, but it sounds interesting. I
Yeah,
heard it's a really good party. Should just check it out one day. Why not? Fuck it.
yeah. I'll drag my retired butt out there and go check it out
There's
sometime.
I see I see a lot of older people, and it's nice because when I was a kid, you didn't,
Right,
you know, you didn't see older people, and then now you see people well in their like 50s and 60s
right.
on a raves and having a great time, and everybody's super loving and accepting. That's the best thing about that community. They don't give a shit what you're doing.
Exactly. Well, I think that
You
we're
know?
probably the older people that we didn't see when we were going, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit. So you get into active duty. You're getting a regular paycheck now. By no means is anybody on active duty rich, but this has got to be a lot different from where you were just coming from. And how did that impact you?
Well, growing up broke
Yeah.
and not I mean, I knew a little bit about managing my finances, but not really. Like I was given allowance and stuff, and I would, I think that kind of stuff is important.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, once I started making money, I just started spending money.
The more you make, the more you spend, right?
I know. I fell into the credit trap for a little bit. My deployment, I literally paid off my credit card after like my first or second check, and during my deployment, and I cut that shit up and scattered it in the wind. I was like, nope. I was like, those things are not for me.
No, never doing that again, ever.
Right?
So,
So,
when you went on active duty, did you do a different MOS then? Did you go to a different AIT? Um,
mm-mm.
so you're
No,
still
I just stayed a machinist. Yeah.
okay. So you're still a
Yeah.
machinist on active duty.
Yep. And
Okay.
so I worked directly next to like diesel mechanics and stuff and generator mechanics. So I learned a lot of different MOSs. It was just learn how to turn some damn wrenches mostly. And I love turning wrenches. Um, but yeah, like I was my first unit, I wasn't very gainfully employed. Sometimes we had a lot of work going on and stuff to do, but my second unit was a maintenance unit in Germany, and that was I had a lot more to do there
Okay. All right. So where were
versus engineers first. Sorry, should have
okay?
added that.
So you're in Benning, and then you go to Germany after
I
that.
did.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I was at from yeah like 3 years, and then I went to Germany.
okay. Tell me a little bit about Germany. How was that for you?
I love Germany.
Yeah.
I did. I was 22 years old, and yeah, I was 22 years old, and it was. it was just wild time for me, and being a party type guy, there's always places to party and people are super cool. I like, I was trying all the foods and stuff because, growing up in Indiana, it's a lot of meat and potatoes and you don't really explore and stuff like that. And then I start going and hanging out in places like Atlanta where it's just like a hub of culture and food and stuff. And you can try all the flavors of the world, like before it was cool,
Right, right. Well,
And
I want to ask you. I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to ask you too, because when I was at Leonard Wood for officer basic course, and
Mhm.
there was actually this German restaurant outside the gate that was like legit German food. Was that there when you were there?
No, I don't know.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I never got the tour around, unfortunately,
Oh,
there.
well, lucky you. We'll share some
Yeah.
stories about that after we talk. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. So you're in Germany. You're enjoying the food. Are you a warm beer or cold beer guy, or not a beer guy at all?
Um, back then I would drink either, to be honest with you. I've always been a beer snob though.
Uh huh.
Like I was never like, don't like I was a guy that like I went to the party, they're like, oh, we're having a kegger this weekend, and I'm like, what kind you having? They're like Coors Light. I'm like, who needs a designated driver? you know, I'm like, but and I would always bring my own beer if I were going to drink, but I was never really a big drinker. I went
Okay.
through a phase of that, but um that I scored this sweet scar right here after the night I got promoted to E4. I used my face as a door knocker.
Oh, nice. Was that in Germany or was that at stateside?
That was at Fort Benning, yeah. Yeah, that
Uh,
was that was a story to tell.
yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. So Germany was good for you then. You enjoyed it there.
I did. I
Okay.
did.
Anything stick
Um
out about Germany that you want to share?
I I really like history,
Hmm.
and so I loved how much history was in a place like that. I laugh and there was this bar. It was like 700 years old, you know, and we used to hang out in this bar. And the bartender one time he was like, "You Americans," he's like, you know what? He's like, that bar stool is older than your whole country.
That gave you a little perspective, did it?
Yeah, it's just I got nothing for that. But I
Right.
was stationed in a place called Bomberg, and it was one of the places that didn't get blown all to shit during the wars.
Hmm.
And so, it was just very rich history, and there was a cathedral there. There was like a monastery, a rose garden, and just there was just so much to do there too, because there's a shit ton of breweries.
Hmm. It is
And there was
Germany.
yeah, and it was, like I said, just food everywhere too,
Hmm.
and so just a much different. It was being immersed in a whole different culture, which growing up in
Yeah.
Anderson, Indiana, you know,
You probably weren't going to take any trips to Germany anytime soon.
probably not,
Yeah.
and then traveling around while I was there, I went to a couple other countries and stuff, but like I said, I just really enjoyed it. It was a fun place.
Yeah. It sounds very cool. The one place I've never been, I've got a really good German last name, but have not been to Germany yet. So I'll have to check it out sometime. So you're there for about 3 years, and then where do you go from Germany?
Well, while I was in Germany, that was OF1. So
Okay.
we were part of the initial invasion of Iraq during that time.
All right.
And so yeah, we were I think it was March 3rd. March 3rd we deployed to Kuwait, and we were, getting all our stuff ready, and they're, you know, like like we're alerted and this is happening,
Right.
and then we start pushing across the border and all that stuff. But yeah, yeah, it was part of the invasion of Iraq.
And this is when they're using like soft side Humvees and
This
camp
is
camp Beering doesn't exist. This is the real
Mhm.
deal.
Yeah, this is why I mentioned earlier why it's important to be a problem solver, and we up armored our own vehicles because we just welded this shit together with stuff we confiscated from the Iraqis. So when we landed in an area called Camp Dogwood. It was south, like east of Fallujah,
Mhm.
and it got closed down. I think it closed down in October of that year. or it became like a training camp or something like that. But it was no longer like a base where a bunch of soldiers were.
Right.
Uh, but we were in this little compound. But next to us, we called it Home Depot because they had, I mean, they had, it was like a machinist's heaven, seriously, because they had drill presses and lathes and just everything, bandsaws, everything we could possibly need to run a shop. And then they had stocks of metal there too. And so like we started making like gun mounts and stuff like that. And then later on we started taking sheets of metal and cutting it up and with doors and everything and putting it on the sides of the vehicles. And I was a machine gunner at the time. So my first my not my first gunship, but it was one that we'd all welded together. And it was like a pole with the rifle on it, and then there was a counterbalance shield
Mhm.
kind of piece of metal, and then it was like a two-way, and then it had like kick plates so I could spin around the gun mount and then swivel with the the rifle too. And it
Sounds
had a
sounds
seatbelt on it and
eerily
everything because
sounds
that was useful.
sounds eerily similar to how our Humvees were set up when they were really set up for that, right?
Yeah,
So you guys were doing it before it was cool.
yeah, yeah. And I think we up armored the the vehicles in our unit, but then we up armored, I don't know, well over 100 some odd vehicles in other units. And then later they ended up distributing the plans and all that stuff. And other units started making it. We started seeing armor, because we didn't, like I said, we didn't have shit.
Right.
And I deployed with a flak vest, mind you.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a IBA with body armor and all that shit. Like anything above, I don't know, like a 9 mil round would go right through that damn thing.
Yeah. We,
So
we weren't really well prepared for that.
no,
Not at all.
no.
And I would say with the work that you guys did, you probably saved a few lives.
I'm sure, I mean, what the landmine plan was to throw sandbags in the floor of your soft skin Humvee. So you get dust and rocks as projectiles in your face to shred you to bits instead of a mine.
Yeah. It sounds like, wow, what a great plan.
I know. Sounds like a fucking plan to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to the guys that were there, like during the initial push, I shake my head because I'm like, man, you couldn't get anything done unless you had an up armored Humvee that was like driving around in a bank vault. But you guys were just doing what you had to do because that's what soldiers do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm here.
Right, right, exactly. So that initial invasion though, how long were you there?
12 months.
Okay, so you're there for a whole year.
Yeah.
But you were was it a constant movement thing, or were you like at that base that you were working out of?
So I was mostly there. I was there for the first 6 months and then went up to Anaconda, which is up in Balad, which later became like a really like main hub. I think it's still most of it's still there.
Mhm.
Or whatever. I don't know if anyway. Um, but yeah, I was there the second 6 months, and um, that was an interesting place. But I during that time I spent a lot of time on the road
Mhm.
too. Um, we did convoy security mostly. So
Yeah, Anaconda became like a where you would get stuff that you couldn't get. Like if we needed parts or whatever,
yeah,
we'd
yeah,
fly our supply guy over to Anaconda. He'd spend a couple of days. He'd collect up all the shit we needed.
yeah.
Um, so
Biop was the only other place you could get shit too,
yeah,
either.
we were in
Yeah,
northern Iraq, so buy-up wasn't really an option unless we absolutely had to have something. But we never had to have anything like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So that I mean, did a lot happen on that first deployment, or was that? Would you call that a quiet deployment?
No, I mean they were still bombing, like that was interesting.
Hmm.
Like we got to see things that other people didn't get to see. Like they stopped bombing after a few months. Seeing things like A-10s and stuff rip through villages,
Right.
which is interesting as well. Apaches and things like that. And there was, especially back then, we didn't really have IEDs.
Hmm.
IEDs started to become a thing right before we left, and it had some near misses with that. But mostly it was the mortars and Chinese rockets that we would get in the bases almost nightly. Um, and I mean, it was like, it was almost every fucking night. And it was to the point where it's like, just let me sleep, man. I just want to sleep. I don't want to go to the bunker. Can I just stay here? Like, if I
Right.
die, I die. I don't fucking care. Like,
I'm
I
going to
want to
die if I don't
get
get any
nap,
more sleep.
you know? Um, but yeah, like that was kind of the worst of it. You get shootings and stuff like that, of course. Like you get shot at and, firefights, that kind of stupid shit. But nothing to the level, like we weren't in the cities most of the time. Like if we were going through the cities, like sometimes we would be in that, and and their tactics are always just pop off a few and then take off type of deal. So, you know,
Right.
um, other things were just like, it's the beginning of the war. So as we're pushing through, like you see the aftermath of like the infantry, a lot of, bodies and fucking burned vehicles and, shit like that just everywhere. And, that was interesting. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
most of the time, I wouldn't say it was very quiet.
right.
It
Right.
wasn't nearly as bad as like being in this inner cities or something like that, or even the surge,
Yeah.
you know. Because like I had friends that were there during the surge, and it just became like a total shit show. Pretty much the whole damn country was kind of lit up with action,
It was,
and
it
then especially in certain cities.
was a busy time for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So did you go back to Germany after that
Yeah.
deployment then?
Yeah.
All right. And then how much longer were you in Germany, or did you go someplace after that?
No, I did. But I left the military with a pretty bad taste in my mouth. Like I did not ever think I was going to go back in. And um 2005, beginning of 2005, I got out, and I knew I wanted to go to college. So I'd already kind of started that, but
Right.
I'd gone back to Germany. I think I was back for 6 or 7 months, and they'd already put me on orders to go to Fort Stewart. And we were already been attached to Third ID during deployment, and they were basically turning around and going right back.
Mm.
And I was like, no,
You wanted no part of that?
no, no. I was like, I had an, I would, when I say that some really shitty decisions were made, and a lot of like I was pretty surprised. Nobody in my unit died.
Uh
No
huh.
one. You know, we actually had to start having problems when we got back. Which is most people's story. Um,
Yeah, we lost. I lost more of my soldiers. I didn't lose anybody when I was deployed. I brought all my guys home, all my gals home. But yeah, we started losing them after we got back.
yeah,
That was the hard part.
it's the hard part. Yep.
Yep. So you say like I'm not doing this again. So you decided, look, I'm getting out.
Yeah.
So you got out. Where did you go back home to Indiana, or where'd you go from there?
No, I went back to Atlanta actually.
Okay.
I actually had a couple options. I was looking at art schools and stuff, and I was looking in either Chicago, because I used to party in Chicago a lot, but I didn't really know anybody up there, Whereas Atlanta, I'd already built a community, Like I said, I knew more civilian types than I did the military types so I had a community there, people, so I could couch surf if I needed to. I lived with my friends most of the time when I got back and through college and stuff like that, and so I um definitely, and I liked Atlanta, especially in the early 2000s. It was a cool place. It was during the boost and all that kind of shit. It was a cool place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Atlanta's a very cool city.
Yeah.
It's like a hub for a lot of major business, which means there's a lot of money there, which means there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you, where'd you end up going to college then?
I went to the Art Institute.
Okay.
Um my undergrad's in media arts and animation. So yeah.
What was your plan from that?
The plan was to go into the industry, actually.
Yeah.
College was interesting. You know, I was a 25-year-old war veteran in a time when those didn't exist, you know,
Yeah.
and I was, of course, trying to process everything that I had been through, like just gotten out of the military, I just got back from a war, you
Right.
know, and, um, and at that time, especially, I mean, I'm almost 45.
Hmm.
And when I was that age, like 25, people thought I was like fucking 15. I just always looked so much younger. And so like when going to school there, people are like, dude, why is that guy so angry? Because I worked there too. I worked at the college.
Yeah.
I was but I was just kind of salty all the time. And it was like he was like in Iraq like a year ago, right? Like, and they're
Oh,
like,
he's
what?
he's an angry veteran. Oh no.
Yeah. In a time when those, people, the only ones people knew were Desert Storm and Vietnam.
Yeah.
So like no, very few people had been back from, almost nobody had been back from Iraq, in the grand scheme of things. And Afghanistan, we'd only been a couple years deep in that. So um
And deployment changes you.
it does.
Like
It does.
you're not necessarily the exact same person you were when you left.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean it's just a different life.
Right.
Um but started school 2005, and I was 25 years old and started going to school and art school. While I was enlisted, I was there at Fort Benning and coming up to Atlanta. One of my friends who was a really good friend when I was in high school, he was in the animation field, and I always kind of thought I would go down that route. And so when I got out of the army the first time, that's what I did is I went to school for animation, and
Yeah. And that's really good work if you can get the work, right? I mean, that's
yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, my school was one of those schools that was sued a few years ago for basically ripping people off. And I
yeah.
walked away with a bachelor's degree that at the time was kind of still worth something, but I spent like $110,000 to get this thing. And so,
Man, you should
uh,
be a dentist by then.
right,
That's a lot of money.
it was very like it was fraudulent what they did.
Hmm.
Like they were sued, and a lot of those loans ended up getting forgiven too.
Right.
Which rightfully so, because the I mean that was fraud. And so like that whole debate about that, I was one of those people that got into that.
Yeah. I got you.
Luckily I did. I paid all my private loans off, and then my federal went away whenever I got my 100%. When that Trump signed that bill, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Because as the story goes, I was in school for like a little over 3 years. I kind of accelerated my degree, and I graduated in December of 2008.
Huh.
And in a time
That's a great time to be looking for a job or own a house, right?
right,
Yeah.
right, and so I ended up going back in the army
Hmm.
because I put out hundreds of applications, and the only call I got back was the army. And then I ended up getting a job in the interim, which I ended up liking too. But I ended up going back, and I got a commission the next time. So
Okay. And where did you go? Where did you enter back into the army at? Did you go back to Benning?
I did because while I was in college, I had my daughter, and her mom and I weren't together, and she lived up in North Georgia.
Okay.
So I wanted to stay at Fort Benning for her,
Yeah.
or at least be nearby.
I,
So
I think it's awesome that because many times, I mean, this is a story as long as the military's been around, right? Someone gets pregnant, someone has a baby, and the child never knows the dad. They weren't really together. But it sounds to me like you have made it a point to be a part of your daughter's life.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're when I say we're really close, like I've told her, I'm like, I've known things about your life long before you knew them. Like, like I've just like known, like she's an artist now. She has her own business,
Uh-huh.
you know, and I knew she was going to be an artist since the moment she was born. And I've nurtured that like her whole life, because it was one of those things. It's like I feel like like I said, I just knew things about her.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then but I knew I didn't want to be gone, because my dad moved away when I was like 7.
Hmm.
And then I rarely saw him again. Like I only saw him probably handful of times Well, I used to see him during the summers when I was a kid, but I mean, as an adult, probably like a handful of times. Yeah.
Right. Well, you don't develop
So,
that relation if you don't see them a lot when you're a kid. You don't develop necessarily that great
mm-mm.
relationship. So you're at Benning. Am I going to assume that you somehow became an infantry officer?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I
So
was
what? So
married.
what
uh,
precipitated that change for you? Like, why? And not that there's
So,
anything wrong with that. I'm just curious because you were a machinist. You went to art school. Like you are
right.
clearly an artist who
Right.
creates things, and I feel like the infantry is like, from my perspective, a lot different than that.
Extremely different
so,
than that.
so
And
yeah, what was the attraction?
it's funny. It's funny because I told when I was a commander, my first sergeant was one of my best friends. We actually were platoon leader and platoon sergeant together. He frocked, I pinned captain. He took a company, I took the company,
That's
and
awesome.
so like it was an amazing like and I I always told him that the thing about the infantry, I said the thing about the infantry at the end of the day, I don't have a product. There's nothing to look at. I haven't like, soldiers are trained, things are done, this and that. I was like, but there's no real in like the end state is like in the on the battlefield, like things are destroyed,
Right.
it's shit like that. So it's very much different than creating things, you're destroying things, but
Yeah.
probably in a creative way at some level,
nothing to
you
put
know?
nothing to pin up on your refrigerator at the end of the night.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So it was not an easy concept for me to grasp, to be quite honest with you, like being in the infantry, like it was good though, because what I did enjoy about the infantry, and that's the whole reason why I joined the infantry, is because I wanted the most time with soldiers that I could get, you know? And so my roommate, because he asked me, he was my roommate in OCS, and he was infantry, went into ordnance, and I was ordnance and went infantry.
Uh-huh.
And because he asked me, he goes, "Well, what do you want to get out of being an officer?" And I was like, "Well, I want to spend as much time with troops as I can." He goes, The infantry is you're not gonna spend any more time than in the infantry." And I was like, "You're right." And so, literally, like the night before I chose, because we were OML list, or I went to OCS,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
and
that's
so we
what I
did the
did as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great, great. I loved OCS. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I was 14 years enlisted. I went to OCS when I was like 38.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
I was an old fucker when
Yeah.
I went to
Yeah.
OCS.
Right. Oh yeah, you told me that. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
so you could get the top three and get the captain's pay as your retirement.
Yeah,
I know a lot
exactly.
of people that do that.
Well,
You're not
actually,
captain. You're Navy. You're Navy, not
no,
captain's
no,
pay.
no, no, no. Actually, so I'll share this with you is that I was Navy for 10 years, but then I was Army National Guard for
You were
11 years.
okay.
And so I was enlisted in the National Guard for a while. And then I didn't even think about the pay. Like the retired pay is amazing. I didn't think about that. When I switched over, I was like, I am tired of being the victim of other people's stupid decisions.
Yeah.
I've been enlisted for a long time. I get how these decisions impact people. I want to be the guy making the decisions that impact people because even though we have to do things that we don't want to do, I understand how it's going to impact people.
Yeah.
And if I have to, I can sit down and go, look, I understand this is what we're going to do. We have to do it. Or I can say, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
But there's something you gain from being enlisted. When you become an officer, they don't like remove that part of your brain that has common sense in it. Right.
No, I know.
And I love what you said about working with soldiers because there is nothing like I think that's also why I retired as a captain was because I was going to go to staff and I loved being with soldiers and that green tab time was about to be done. So it was just time for me to go.
Yep.
But anyway, so I'm with you 100%. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
being with soldiers is the whole purpose. Like sitting in an office being pissed about your job and hating life is not what you signed up for. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you branch infantry
Yep.
and so what happens from there?
Um, well, in IBOLIC, which is our officer school, infantry basic officer school, I get orders to go to Fort Knox, and I was like, I want to stay here, for my daughter.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there's no freaking way in hell I would stay in Georgia or stay at Fort Benning or anything like that. I would have probably gone back to Europe or something like that, maybe even Asia or something. That would have been, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but stayed at Fort Benning, and my first unit there, I went to I went to Sledgehammer, Third ID, Third Brigade, and being a prior Fort Benning soldier, I knew the reputation of Third Brigade, and I knew I was going to suffer there.
At least you knew it was coming.
I did, and that's probably one of those sacrifices my daughter will never understand. And that's where I met your son.
Yeah. Yeah.
And became his platoon leader. Um, he I enjoyed platoon leader time actually. I got there. I got there at the end of 2010, I think. Yeah, the end of 2010 at the unit, and I was up in the three shop because that's where all the freaking officers go. And I heard there was a platoon leader spot, and so I like literally just walked over to the commander's office and I was like, "Hey, hey, sir, I hear you need a platoon leader. Well, I need a platoon, and I don't want to hang out in three shop." you know,
Right.
and it's that prior enlisted. It's like I don't need to be told what to do. Like I'm gonna go find a job or something. Shit.
Well, and as a commander, that's the platoon leader I want. I don't want the
Right.
platoon leader that's there because he needs the time so he can punch his ticket. Like I want the guy that wants to be a platoon leader.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The guy who wants to be in front of freaking soldiers and not sitting at a desk.
Exactly.
you know. And so, yeah, so I did my PL time there at Third ID. I was in Hard Rock Company, which is our Alpha company. I was in the Audie Murphy Brigade or Audie Murphy Regiment,
Uh huh.
115. So Baker Company. That was his company. Um, but I loved being a platoon leader. It was hard. God, it was hard. But I learned a lot of lessons during that time. Um, it was one of those things. It was really weird because coming from sustainment to infantry, like it took me a while to feel like I was infantry,
Yeah.
and so like I still brought, and I realized how much that machinist mentality and that enlisted mentality really helped as being an infantry officer, having that common sense and that ability to solve problems, and I enjoyed that. And the thing is like especially when I first got there, I was a little timid, you know? I just I was just always stressed out,
Mhm.
and I just didn't know how to manage that level of pressure and stress that they could put you under, you know? And also, I was doing my best. And once I got the hang of things and I kind of stood up on my own 2 feet, like that's whenever things started, like the soldiers started to respond better and, like the relationship became much better. And a lot of friends that I still talk to today are people that I led in the military,
Mhm.
and I think that to me says something, and, and I always kind of led people in a way that was like, I feel like it was in a way that I'm just a cog in the machine, just like you are. It's just I'm the top cog that's causing, like, but also I've got a drive shaft at some level, and I got
Right.
so I always wanted everybody to feel like you're a valuable part of this team, and your things matter. But at the end of the day, I got to make the decision, and I'm prepared. I'm here because that's what I'm appointed to do. You
Yeah.
know, you don't have to like it, but no, at the end of the day, I had your best interest in mind,
Well, and
you know?
I think one of the hardest parts about being a platoon leader, but also about being a company commander, is that no one sees the stuff that they don't see. Like no one sees the things that you kept
Oh yeah.
from rolling. You know what I mean?
Deflected.
From rolling downhill, and
Oh yeah.
you can't like walk around and announce that. Oh, look what I did, because that's just that's not good leadership. But
Right.
sometimes it's frustrating because everyone thinks that you're not. Sometimes they think you don't have their back, even though they know that you do, because they see the one thing that pissed them off. They don't see the 50 things that you kept at
Yeah.
bay, so they wouldn't have to do stupid shit.
Yeah.
And that's a hard part about leadership. But as a former enlisted person, you kind of knew the things that, hey, we either don't need to do this or we don't need to do it this way. We can do this differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you?
Yeah. And I never wanted, it's kind of like how you are, how you are with your kids. You don't want your kids to grow up in the life you did,
Yeah.
and I very much felt that way. Like I didn't want my soldiers to suffer from shit that, shit rolling downhill. So yeah, a lot of times, it was, I often tell people, I'm like, if I worked for you, you probably didn't like me. If I worked with you, it was probably a good 50-50.
Uh-huh.
But most people that worked for me really liked me. Not everybody, because I wouldn't expect that to be the case. I'm gonna piss a few people off, and I'm perfectly okay with that. You know,
Yeah.
but like most people, especially the times whenever I really started to get the hang of things and stuff like that, because I was not one of those guys that was afraid to be like, no, I'm not fucking doing that. Like I'm not, or or I definitely wanted to come off as competent to my leadership,
Right.
because that was my biggest thing, is coming off as a competent leader, because then it's just like they can't really, they can swing their dick around in your face, but at the end of the day, like it's I need logic. And
Yep.
we have doctrine and things like that. So it's like you can always rely on those things and be like, no, sir, that's not what's happening. you know?
Right. You can let them have their kabuki dick dance, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah,
have
exactly.
you're going to have a good plan, something logical come out. Now, did you deploy as a platoon leader, as a infantry platoon leader?
No, actually, I deployed right after that.
Okay.
We just went to Kuwait that time. So we were part of Operation New Dawn.
Uh-huh.
This was in 2012.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, right after I retired.
Oh,
2012.
really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. So you were a PL for what, like 18 months? Is that your rotation usually?
Uh,
Or how's it work for you guys?
I think I was like 12 or 13 or something like that.
Okay.
Something like, yeah, because I think you only do a year as a PO.
Okay. And then did you roll into company command right from there?
No, I went to the battalion S4 shop actually. I was a logistician. And to be honest with you, I liked being a logistician. I don't like logisticians.
I gotcha.
Um, and I don't say that because I get along with a lot of them, don't get me wrong. Like I loved the enlisted ones.
Hmm.
I loved most of the warrant officers, but not the officers. 100% not the officers. Not 100%, but I did, you know, it was a very, I did like being a logistician though. Because I was really good. Because I came from, bumfuck Indiana, where, we bartered everything and things like that. And so my job over there, I was at battalion when we deployed, but then I went up to brigade while we were there shortly after we got there. There was a guy who needed some um, like KD time or something, because he'd already promoted captain. I was still a lieutenant.
Yeah.
So I ended up going up to brigade after a few months of being the battalion S4. And then other people would remember that story very differently.
I'm sure they would. Everyone has their version of what happened, right?
But we'll just put it as I caused a little bit of trouble and was kind of
I can hardly believe that, Jimmy.
anyway. Um, yeah, so I went up to brigade, and my task, I was given a couple units to where my task was to find stuff for them, um, and stuff that they needed. So one of them was in Jordan and the other one was in UAE. And so this is to 2012, mind you, right?
Right. Right.
So all this stuff had um come back from Iraq, and it was just dumped everywhere. The Connex is full of fucking shit everywhere. And so I would literally go to my units and like, tell me what you need and blah, 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 and this and that. And they'd just give me a list of shit, and we'd go fucking bolt cutting fucking locks and going through these containers. Or like we went over to camp. I was at Buring at that time,
Uh-huh.
and went over to Virginia, and there was just stockpiles of shit over there. And I just started walking into units and be like, like who's in charge of all this stuff out here? And that was one of the cool things you could do as an officer, even as a first lieutenant, like I still, like who's in charge of all this stuff? Oh, that's my stuff. Hey, do you have X, Y, and Z? And they're like, yeah. And it was literally like this. Well, since you've helped me, what do you need? And they'd be like, well, we need these. And I'd be like, all right. So literally I was just kind of finding stuff and just,
Yeah.
borrowing from John to pay Paul type of thing, just like, and that was my job and it was a lot of fun. So, you
It
know,
almost feels like your life kind of led up to that. I mean, it, working as a machinist, I know that you had to probably swap and bargain and deal to get stuff you needed in order to get stuff done right up through what you're doing here.
yeah. Yeah. So that was like I said, that was kind of my job, at least for a few months. And then
Mhm.
it got real fucking boring.
Yeah, once you've solved all the problems, what are you going to do now?
It's funny because I've had multiple people tell me I'm really good at working myself out of a job. And I'm like, and that kind of the point. Like if you could do that and still get the same paycheck when you do the same fucking thing.
Right? Let's work really, really hard right now, and then we don't have to work really, really hard later on.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So you were in Kuwait. Is that another 12-month deployment then to Kuwait?
No, that was 9.
Okay.
Think. Yeah, that was when they were doing those little 9-month rotations. So
Yeah, because the war was over, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So okay, I got you. So where did you go from there?
From there, yeah, just I went back to Benning,
Hmm.
and then it was one of those times when you get back from deployment and everybody's got to do shift change. So everybody, and I needed XO time, and this is a time where this unit would not let you go. They like our I think I want to say our brigade commander got force retired after he got back.
Uh-huh.
It was pretty fucking terrible. um, but this is one of those times where yeah, they just wouldn't let you go. And I got back, and again, I'm not gonna sit around and wait on the army to fucking get off their fucking ass and tell me what to do. So I start looking for a job in other units, an XO job, because all the jobs are taken.
Right.
And so I find a job across post over at the because this is around the time they moved the Cav and armor school down there. So
Uh-huh.
there was a unit um, called it was 129 infantry, and they owned like combative school and what was called the X4 sniper school and all kinds of other stuff. Um, so I found a job down there in the X4 as an XO. And I remember they didn't want me to go, and the DCO's talking to me. He's like, "Well, you need to go find a job." And I was like, "I found a job, but another unit." He's like, "Well, they're not going to let you go." And I was like, "Why not?" And he goes, "Well, we're not letting." The commander said nobody can, people can't PCS. And I was like, no. It's like,
That's not how that
I said,
works.
I said, okay, I need an XO job. Do you have an XO job, sir? And he goes, no. And I said, well, then you need to sign this. You need to get this signed so I can go to the unit. And I said, if you don't, I'm going to raise holy hell in here, sir. Like, I'm going to start making phone calls to people you don't want to hear from, you know? And I was like, you're fucking with my career, dude. I was
Right.
like, nothing personal. I was like, all because you don't want officers to leave, man. Fuck you.
So the funny thing about that is I think there's a guy right there who's lost complete sight of what you're supposed to be doing, because your job as a leader is to develop your other leaders to take on the next job, right?
Right.
And to promote them and to get them there. It's not to keep them around so you look good.
Yeah. Well, if that, I mean, like I said, I think that commander was relieved. So
Yeah.
when we got back, so many people were trying to jump ship, like a bunch of people were trying to jump ship.
Mhm.
And it was the point where it raised some flags, and that commander was investigated. And I think that's why I'm pretty sure he was forced retired after that. So,
Would make sense.
yeah. So, this is 13
Yeah.
in a time whenever like they right before they started really start cutting down.
Hmm.
But, you know,
Yeah.
So,
So how was your XO time? How did you enjoy that? Because I was never an XO.
oh, really?
Yeah, went right from platoon leader to company commander, actually back to back company commands.
Wow.
And then I did logistics for a little while and retired. But yeah, I never. But my XO when I deployed, my XO was a badass. So I'm just curious how your XO time was.
So I was in so the X4, the experimental force, they were this special unit that tests things for the military, right? So, the companies make it, they send it to us. It's literally an HQ, which is only about maybe 10 people, and then one platoon of infantry guys,
Yeah.
and then that was the whole company. Um, but I was the XO for it. Not a huge, not a, not, not this screaming eagles or anything cool like that. But man, it was excuse me, excuse me again. It was a good unit. Like it was fun because like where in the army do you get to go play with fucking toys like new weapons and shit and optics and stuff like that. Like that's a lot of fun and get paid to do it.
Every day is Christmas.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And so I in that unit, it depended on the day what job I was doing because I was a PL sometimes too.
Uh huh.
And it was cool because I got a chance to do both. And unfortunately, during that time in that part of my life, I was going through a lot of shit outside of the military with in my marriage and stuff. So I feel bad. Um, I feel bad for probably the way I was some of those times, even when I was a platoon leader.
Yeah.
Um, but we're all human. It is what it is. Um, but ultimately, I did make a lot of very strong connections in that unit, and I had so much fun. Like just when we were out there playing and just doing stupid shit in the woods and goofing off. Like we went to like training sites. Like we went out to Fort Dix for a month and just tested a bunch of stuff, and then me and the boys we went out to let's see, we went to Philadelphia together. We went to New York City. They were going out way more than I was, but but yeah, I was just having fun like that and just doing wild shit. Like when we went to New York, it was wild.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah. So
Anybody get
yeah,
arrested?
no,
Oh, okay.
no.
That's it.
Luckily, as long as no one gets arrested or goes to the hospital, I consider it a win.
I totally agree.
So yeah,
Yeah. So how long was
but
that gig for you?
I think I was there over a year, maybe a year and a half,
Uh-huh.
and then I pinned captain. And so I was the same rank as the commander, as the XO. We already had a little bit of conflict going on as it was, but when I pinned captain, it's like, it's like say something now, dude. Like,
Right?
but ultimately it wasn't. When we became peers, we actually were pretty cool together. So, but yeah, that job, and then that was the job. Literally, the platoon sergeant, he frocked to E8, and um, I had pinned captain, and I never, still to this day, I never went to command course. But because I was in a TRADOC unit, I could take command,
Hmm.
and my first command was actually lieutenant colonel's billet. It was in this unit called the Net C, and so it was the unit. So if you ever went through what they call OpNet, and I don't remember what the other branches call it, but for infantry guys, it's called OpNet, and it's basically like, here's your Bradley, all the way up to this is how you shoot, move, and communicate a platoon or a company of Bradleys, right?
Right.
So I owned like as a commander, I owned all the units that did that, like all the guys that trained like the National Guard, Army Reserve, active duty on all of those vehicles, whether it was the Bradley Striker or Abrams tank. That was a cool fucking job. And unfortunately I only got to hang on to that one for like 6 or 7 months.
Hmm.
Because I was a captain.
Right. Right. They need a lieutenant colonel in there, clearly.
Yeah, they needed a lieutenant colonel. And so I was just a kind of a placeholder. And the commander had told me, he's like, you'll just be in there for as long as you can. And I was like, going in, I was like, that's cool. But I really like that job, and like the people in my unit were, um, they were all the old timers. Honestly, they were
Uh-huh.
all like E7s and E8s. I think I had like 5 or 6 E8s, and a bunch of E7s and a bunch of E6s, and very few lower enlisted at all.
Yeah. These guys
So
were, it sounds like these guys maybe knew how to get stuff done.
yeah, so the OpNet guys, they go out there and they're train the units, but them being like senior NCOs and stuff like that, and like they looked at me, and of course they think because I'm a young looking captain,
Right.
even in my 30s, I'm still a young looking captain. They think I'm some cherry ass captain. My first sergeant like pulls these guys to the side and like, listen, he's looking out for your best interest, guys. Like, like I just came over here with him, So I had somebody kind of vouch for me. And then I started implementing things that made sense. Holy shit, this guy's doing things that make fucking sense.
Right.
And so like immediately kind of grabbed the E8s and stuff like that. And they understood like what I was trying to do, and they, I guess the guy before me and the leadership they had, the commander and first sergeant were just not good. So, um, but you know, John and I go over there, and like we're already homies. We watch movies together and hang out as families and shit. Like,
Yeah.
so it was a good time, and I did that for 6 months, and then actually it was weird because we were on a training exercise, and I just pinned captain, and we'd done a training exercise, and the commander was pissing me off, and I did something to just show my ass
Right.
during the training exercise, and he was pissed. He was so mad, and he comes up to me later that day, and he's like, Colonel wants to see you, and I was like, I was like, fuck. And I'm just like, you know what? I've earned this. I'm fine with this. Whatever happens, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I go to the colonel's office, and he's like, hey, you know the net platoon or the net company? And I was like, yeah. He's like, they were gonna force retiring the dude that was there, right?
Mhm.
The colonel that was there. And they're like, yeah, they're gonna force retire him. He goes, and they were like, they need somebody to take the spot. And I was like, I'm sitting there like, I'm thinking it's a lieutenant colonel's position. I'm not thinking he's gonna,
Right.
offer me the position. But they do have a captain that was the XO there. So I'm thinking maybe that's it or something like that. Not even that. I'm not even thinking that. It's not even on my radar. I'm thinking I'm going there to get my ass chewed out.
Right.
But like, but he's like, you want to take command of it? And I'm like, yes, yes, sir, I do. Like, I was like, that's cool. And so yeah, I took that job, and then like I said, did that for 6 months, and
Mhm.
then I think I was in the three shop for like a month, and then one of my buddies, he was the commander of, it was Delta Company back then. They kept this dude in command all the way up until he was supposed to clear. He was getting out of the army, and I was in his office, and I was like, dude, aren't you getting out of the army like soon? He said, yeah. And I said, well, shouldn't you be clearing? He's like, yeah, I should be. And I'm like, why aren't you? He goes, I was like, why are you even in command, dude? Like, you should have been out of command really, realistically a year ago, but at least 6 months ago.
Right.
And he's like, they have nobody to take me. And I was like, I'll take your position. I was like, fuck it, dude. I didn't really, I didn't really like it. There was a part of me that was like, do I really want to go into command again? And there was
Right.
another, is like, because I was already on the fence about getting out. And like literally a month prior to that, my wife and I decide we're going to divorce. And then then like literally as I'm doing change of command, I found out she'd been having an affair on me, like right before the divorce. And like,
Oh.
and I'm just like, out of my mind, fucking, And so I take the command and um of his company. And he hands me the guide on.
Uh-huh.
We finish change of command, and he goes and picks up a fucking clearing packet.
Yeah. I had it.
Yeah.
I had it. You got it.
Yeah. I was like, this is crazy. Why would they do that? So they had captains too. That was the weird thing because I was like I'd been up to the three shop and there was captains up there that there was captains in 129, the unit that I was in.
Yeah. Circling
Yeah.
like vultures, needing command, right? Needing
Yeah.
command time.
You
Yeah.
know, and so I went in and was like, I'll take this command, and
Hmm.
so they gave it to me. And so I took, what was it? It was Delta 129, and then it turned into 116 cavalry. And we were the bastard children of the cavalry unit. So that's always fun to be, you know.
Yeah.
I was the we were it was like being the bastard child in a cavalry unit in a unit that's full of yes men.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Good times.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, and because this is the drawdown time. Like this is and people are very very concerned about their OERs and things.
Hmm.
And so, I
Let me ask you a
remember
question real quick.
what's that?
I don't wanna interrupt, but I'm just curious. Do you find that people who are concerned about their OERs are the people getting shit done? You know what I mean?
Not really, no.
Because you strike me as the kind of guy who doesn't really care what goes on his OER. You're going to get shit done, and your OER takes care of itself, right?
Yeah, yeah. There is a line there because I will say that I knew people that knew how to navigate that system and they could do both.
Yeah,
I just wasn't that person.
yeah.
Just call it a character flaw. I don't fucking know. You know what I mean?
Sounds like you had a
Like I
pretty
was
good
just
career, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Um, I did my best. Like I would say as a commander. So I was we called the first unit that I had the land of broken toys.
Uh huh.
Because the guys that I had, they were trainers. They were in TRADOC. Why? Because a lot of them, I had guys that had fucking shrapnel stuck in them. A lot of bullet wounds. These guys have been shot the fuck up and blown up.
Right.
And I have my commander come to me. My brigade commander came to me and he was like, "Well, why aren't you putting these guys out?" And I said, "Sir, do you realize how many years of combat experience I have in my unit, in my company?" I was like, "Do you know how many years of combat experience these guys have?" And I was like, You want to take them and put them out of the military?" I was like, "Why would you do that?" You know, I was like, "You're getting rid of, and now I got to pull somebody who's able-bodied
Hmm.
off the line to bring them here." He looked at me like fucking deer in the headlights,
Yeah.
like the light bulb turned on, but still the moth was just there beating its head against the damn thing. And I was just
Yeah.
like, how did nobody thought this thing through? Like, no, I'm not gonna put these guys out of the military.
Right. Right.
You know?
So now you're stuck in a position where like everybody's like, the people who want to stay in are kind of jockeying for positions,
Oh yeah.
so they don't get riffed out.
Yeah, yeah, and in a time that like I guess if you had bad paper in the military, you're probably going to get put out. That was one of those times. If you
Yeah.
had bad paper, you're probably going to get put out. But then after that, it seemed like it was one of those times. It just seemed like it didn't matter if you were good or as long as you weren't bad, you were somewhat like it was just roulette
Hmm.
because it was like they almost just went down the list of names and just hit like created some algorithm like every fourth person delete. you know
Yeah, which is probably not far off from what
I-
happened.
I'm dead serious. I
Yeah.
think so too because it's I don't know. It was a really odd time to be in the military.
Yeah.
And it's very cutthroat. And like I said, it was a very much yes man time.
Now, was this like 20, what, 16 ish? Somewhere in there?
20, I would say this is from 2014 all the way to 2016.
Yeah.
Um, no, 2013 to 2016. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, and that the writing was on the wall with that.
Right.
If there's if there's any intuitive gift I have is being able to see things from like a 30,000 foot level, kind of, and
Hmm.
you know, things in the world follow patterns. Everything follows a fucking pattern. We
Oh, yeah.
operate on programs, everything kind of operates that way. So like you could see things, predict probabilities, and like that was one of the things I was like, it's gonna get real fucking cutthroat around here. And it's just whatever.
Right.
And so going back to the command, I took the other command and I did that for I caused some hell in that unit too. My commander, my commander, the XO, they did not like me at all. And I was going through the divorce. I was just, I was trying to do what was best for my troops, and outside of that, I did not give a fuck.
Yeah.
I was going through a lot of shit, and my daughter's mom at the time was giving me a lot of shit too. And so I did that command for only about 6 months, seven, yeah, something like that, yeah. And then I had already put in my refrad. That's what it's called. Shit. My release from active duty
Right.
paperwork. And so I was resigning. I wasn't resigning my commission, but I was getting off active duty. Um, so I'd already put that in, and they had captains that needed spots. This is another one of those situations. They had people that needed spots, and I'm like, we're going to put people that need to be here. And they needed an excuse to remove me, and they found it.
Yep. When you turn that paperwork in, that's kind of a signal.
Yeah, I was not relieved for cause from that unit, but it was another one of those units that I was kind of like, they're like, yeah, we're gonna get rid of this dude.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I just never knew how to navigate that system, and my most of that navigation was like, fuck you. That's what I
that's
want.
not that's not necessarily the best way to navigate.
And I knew yeah, I knew what was it was going to get me in trouble a lot, but it's just the nature of who I am.
Yeah. You can't be anybody but Jimmy, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
So how
um,
so how long, like when you turn in that paperwork, how long between that and the time that you're actually released from active duty then?
I stayed on board for, I think I gave myself a little more than a year.
Okay.
Um, and so I stayed on because that's really, you're not supposed to give yourself any less than a year.
Hmm.
There's kind of like a window, I guess you're supposed to put it in. So I just put it in around that time. Um, I went after command. I went to the three shop, and I was there for, let's see. So I was going through my divorce. I'd already met another girl, and I was seeing her, and around May of 2015. So this is 2015. May of 2015. My daughter's mom killed herself.
Oh my God.
And so I went through that.
Yeah. I mean that's hard.
Yeah. And that was a strange time for me. Like, talk about extremely stressful, and talk about not giving a shit
Yeah.
about, like I was going through a divorce, getting out of the military, and my daughter's mom, you know, killed
Right.
herself. And
Did
that
did she have like ongoing problems, or was this just sort
mhm.
of a
Yeah. Yeah. See, it was one of those things. I kind of, I met her at a really rough time in my life.
uh-huh.
And we kind of, I would say we were young. I was 25, and she was, I think, 23, 20, 22, 23. And of course, come back from a war and all that stuff. It was a really bad time in my life. And
Yeah.
we met each other, and we kind of trauma bonded about shit, and she unfortunately drank a lot.
Mhm.
And um that was that was something that, and I knew she had had mental health issues because I think she was on Lexapro back then. And we had, when she was sober, we had an amazing relationship.
Mhm.
Like when she was pregnant with my daughter, she's really good to be around, you know. And she was always a good mom. She was always a good mom. She's just not very good at being a person, and I don't mean
Right.
that as, like, I just don't think she was given a whole lot of tools to succeed in that realm.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that happened. Um, and like I said, that was one of the most stressful times of my life. And people, like I tell people that story, and they're like, I don't know how you made it. And I'm like, well, you really never know what you can get through until you're getting through it.
Well,
When you don't
yeah.
have a fucking choice, you're knee deep in the shit. And you're like, well, you know,
Right. Well, and you have a daughter to think about.
yeah, yeah. And that was an adjustment too.
Yeah.
Becoming not it wasn't a custody battle or anything. Like, all of a sudden I had my daughter like full time.
Right. And how old is she at this time then? She's still
8.
Yeah.
Hey,
Still pretty
yeah,
young.
yeah. This is almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's
So
hard.
yeah. So that was one of those things, and I got I didn't get a single phone call from anybody in my chain of command. Nobody, except my friend who we were commanders together because I'm in the HHC now, HHT. He was my commander. Uh, um, and we're still friends to this day. He called me, and my former chaplain from Kelly Hill was in the unit next to mine, and he had caught wind of it, and he called me, and not even my chaplain.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think we had a chaplain, so I'll give him. Actually, maybe he was kind of acting as our chaplain at that time. But anyway, we we
Yeah.
we had a good relationship, and I appreciated his phone call.
Right. No. Yeah,
Um,
completely.
yeah, but nobody else called, and when I got back, nobody gave a shit. Hey, I'm sorry you're going through that, but I was the current ops guy when that happened, and they didn't take me out of that position, which I kind of forced their hand on that whenever I just stopped doing anything. And the S3 was like bitching about it, and I was like, dude, you have fucking 9 captains in this office, man. I was like, pick one. I was like, I'm going through a lot right now, homie.
Yeah.
And I'm 1 foot out the door. I don't give a shit about this. I need to take there's only one thing I care about right now, and that's my kid, you know? And so yeah, that was a really hard like reality check.
Well,
Um,
I mean that there's like a line in the sand there, and you're on one side or the other. Either people are supporting you or they're not supporting you. That's it's awful to have to go through anyway, and then awful to have to go through it with that kind of leadership.
yeah. Yeah. And so is again getting out of the military with a pretty bad taste in my mouth,
Yeah,
for a second
absolutely.
time,
Yeah.
um, despite my better judgment, went into the National Guard for a little while.
It all started
I
there and
did
it
it,
all ended there apparently.
I think I did it mostly for the insurance because my daughter was very sick for a while,
Yeah.
and I did work in oil and gas after the military, which is like, it, holy shit, that's the dumbest industry I think exists. You think the military's bad? Holy shit, oil and gas is pretty bad.
I worked in the utility business for 28 years.
Okay, so you get it.
But here's the thing for me, it was I can't complain. Like it was a great job, put a roof over my head. It was a great pay. I made a ton of money working there, made a lot of really good friends, but it was very much like the military in that there are times where they will eat their young because things aren't going very well. In
Yeah,
again, just like the military, you learn who you can trust and who your friends are and who the good leaders are. But
yeah,
yes, it was. But I know people who've worked in other industries. It's not like that.
yeah,
But I would know because I spent my whole adult life in the military or working in the utility industry.
yeah. Yeah, oil and gas. The thing I didn't like the most about oil and gas, one, like the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that goes on is by far exceeding the military. I was like, holy shit, you guys, like, you know,
How do you sleep at night?
yeah, seriously, like we're here, this company exists to make money, right? That's what we're supposed to do. Like, we're not. This is a taxpayer money, which is still seems extremely abusive, but
Right.
yeah,
This is your money
like
you're doing this with.
it.
Why?
Yeah, and then the other thing that really bothered me about oil and gas is like I thought the military treated me like I was a child, but the oil and gas is way worse. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, that's crazy. But yeah,
Well, I
that
think that's part of that's again, that's like when you go from the military to the civilian world. I'll give you an example. As a company commander, I had 217 soldiers under my command at
Mhm.
one time because I actually had a platoon of Delta 124 infantry out of Florida with me.
Mm.
Um, anyway, I go back and they're looking for a guy to be a field leader, right, for like 21 dudes and dudettes, and they're like, oh, it's 21. That's a little bit outside of the span of control that we like people to have. Blah blah. Blah. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 21 people? I could do that like from my bed.
Yeah,
you know, I think I can handle this. They don't appreciate
Yeah.
what you know and can treat you like a child because they don't get it. They think you're out goofing off for the last however many years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the odds are probably bad though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
That's true.
they,
So how long did you
they,
stay in oil and gas?
oh shit. I was there for 3 years.
Okay.
Yep. And that was the last job I had, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens after you leave oil and gas? And
So when I was in oil and gas, I lived in Houston
uh-huh.
and I fucking hated Houston. I hated Houston so much. And but I'm glad I went to Houston. I think the whole reason for me to go to Houston was to find Austin. And I really like Austin.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, and the main after I lived there, I probably lived there not even 30 days. And my friend was like, "What do you think of Houston?" I was like, "I think I want to move to Austin." You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it here. And like I said, while I was in oil and gas, what I did is I paid off all my debts. Got my, I later got my school loans taken care of and stuff, but paid off all my debts. I got my 100% permanent total.
Hmm.
So when I was I did a lot of combatives and, in and out of the gym and stuff like that, and just put my body through the fucking ringer. So, one of
Yeah.
those things.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's hard enough to be in the military, but infantry,
mhm.
like that ages you.
It does a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not you don't look old, but your body probably feels way older than it actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to think so, but I would also like to not think so just as easy, you
Yeah.
know. So I do go through, like, I would, I've been chasing hell for like 20 years.
Uh-huh.
I started having pains and stuff during my first enlistment, back pain, knee pain, like that's where PTSD, freaking,
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. And of course, that didn't really stop me from training in martial arts for years afterwards and doing all that stuff. Like when I was a kid, I used to ride BMX and I'd go to metal shows and get into mosh pits, and I was 120 pounds soaking wet, getting manhandled and like fighting with people way bigger than me, and stuff
Right.
like that. So like put my body through the ringer, I've kind of earned, you know in and out of the military, kind of earned the pain that I get. So, um, but yeah, so like I've lived up here in Austin for almost 6 years now, and like I said, I love this place,
Hmm.
and I think the thing I think this is the first place I've ever really lived where it wasn't racist as shit.
Yeah.
I love that about this place. Like, growing up in Indiana, it's my high school demographic was like white and other.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everybody else gets grouped in this other like small percentile, but everybody else is white. And then in the South, you live in the South, it's extremely racist down there, and they just the way it is. But and then outside of Austin, there's some really racist places out there.
Yeah. Well,
But
I think you can find it anywhere. It's a matter of
yeah,
just
of
finding
course.
that place where it's not.
Yeah, but here in Austin, like it's a big hodgepodge of people and everybody's super cool, and it's just one of those places you can run into anybody in Austin.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't matter who it is. And like South by Southwest is going on right now. So this place is just packed full of people, and celebrities are here and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, if I wasn't working down there this last weekend, I would not go anywhere near Austin right now.
It's a
So
yeah. It's a busy time.
it
The
is.
music's good.
It is. Yeah, music's real good. And like I said, there's just I don't know. You ever heard of Andrew Yang?
No.
He ran for president a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I met him a couple years ago. Just had a whole conversation with him and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think it's funny. I asked him a question. I was like, I'm a I'm a combat veteran, and I'm not even registered to vote. And he looks at me, and I go, "How do you get a guy like me to register to vote?"
Right. Did he have an answer?
Well, he asked me why first.
Yeah.
Like, why? And I said, I'd never believed in this system. I said, I didn't believe in it before I joined the military. I was like, it's not really for me, like I don't really do politics or anything.
Uh-huh.
So, I actually recently, I always consider myself a staunch anarchist,
Oh.
but no, I think I'm more of a tribalist. I, I
Mhm.
like, I like the, I like the small tribes type of lifestyle, because that's kind of what I do here in Austin is I kind of build tribes of people. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
Everybody has their own way of living.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
and
I want to ask, like, how's your daughter doing? And is she in school now, or what's going on with her? If that's all right.
yeah, she's about to finish high school.
Uh huh.
Again, check the block type of thing.
Right.
But she has a business. She has a business. She's gonna start helping me work on my business and stuff like that. But she is a phenomenal artist. She is so good. Like I was an artist,
Yeah.
like I still am an artist just in a different way now. Um, she she surpassed me at probably like age 9, 10, you know, just just really good. And now she makes costumes and stuff. That's what she does. Yeah. Makes
Oh,
money off of it.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Now, does this time of year, like when the festivals and stuff are going on in Austin, is that a good time for her? Is that the kind of costumes that she's making, or is this for like production?
No, no, she actually makes furry costumes.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
those big like mascot type things,
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking
Um,
about.
it's funny because when she told me she was into furries, the only thing I knew about furries was the sex thing.
Right, right. There's more to it than that, Jimmy.
Yeah, and I was like, so I had to like do some research because my I don't know, maybe 11-year-old daughter's telling me she's into furries, and I'm like, okay, so and then I got to, and then I always heard it like, because it's there are a lot of creepy people in that community. I will acknowledge that,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of really cool people.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really cool people in that community, to include my daughter, and all her friends. Her friends are some of the coolest, like
Yeah.
coolest kids. Like I was like, damn, I wish I had cool friends. Don't get me wrong, but like we're all troublemakers. These kids aren't troublemakers. They're actually really good kids.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, and
okay,
that's where it's important, as a parent to kind of navigate that and do what you did. You did the research, and you're able to support your
yeah,
daughter.
yeah,
That's very good. So it sounds like you've gotten to the point where if it's not your best life, you're living a good life anyway.
yeah, yeah. Like especially going back to living here in Austin, like she had everything not happened with her mom, then she wouldn't live here with me full time more than likely.
Right.
I probably wouldn't live here either, to be honest with you, because I would have stayed in Georgia.
Hmm.
Um, but that part of that side of the family is very religious, very Southern Baptist type. My daughter's gender fluid. She's also pansexual, not
Hmm.
the lifestyle she could have in that environment. And I'm like I look at like, just like things to be grateful for. And I'm like, we live here in a place where she can be who she wants to be.
Right.
She can be a fucking furry, she can be pansexual and gender fluid. Like I love hanging out with those people. Like they're great people. So, it's just really cool that we just have all these like different cultures and things here. And that's one thing I appreciate about
Yeah.
living.
You found a good community for you
Yeah,
and
at
your
least for
and your
now.
family. Yeah. And
Yeah, at least for now. And um as as I mentioned before, I work a lot with veterans and psychedelic medicine and stuff like that
yeah.
because it's something I'm, very passionate about. And one of the communities I built here was a psychedelic hiking group, veteran hiking group, and a couple of my friends started it, and I kind of just like started building that community and getting the word out there and started like co-running it with these guys, and we're all vets, and we try to keep that community like very safe and allow people to allow people to get together, and if they need to work things out, work it out. If not, we get out there and we meet early in the morning. We usually take mushrooms or something,
Hmm.
something like that, smoke a couple joints, go walking, and then hang out, and then we go grab lunch and then continue our Fridays.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think it's like important to have a supportive environment when you're doing that sort of thing too. I know that I've talked to veterans; it's been very helpful for. It's not for everybody, but
no.
everybody's different. Everybody has a different way of dealing with things.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
like there's a lot to be said about, getting back to nature and stuff like that, especially for things like PTSD.
Right.
And a lot of vets we like to isolate, especially when we get out of the military. I went through the phase where I was like, I'm not hanging out with any fucking vets.
No.
And I went through that phase for quite a while, and then I got involved in a couple groups you know that veteran groups and stuff, and some of them turned out not to be so good. And things were happening in these groups, like people getting, like fights and rapes and other sexual assaults and shit like this, robs, people getting robbed and thefts and stuff. It's just crazy shit. And I'm like, this is not, you know, that is not the type of veteran I want to identify with. That's not the type of group that I want to be around. And I think a lot of vets, they get when they get out, they think that's kind of their options. They take whatever low hanging fruit that they can, and then they get wrapped up in some shit like that, or they fall right back into that life where they're drinking a lot, and they end up the old guys at the bar at the VFW, type of thing.
Hmm.
And I tell people, I'm like, you get to choose what vets you want to hang out with. You really do. Like, obviously, proximity is a big factor. If I live in the middle of fucking nowhere, I'm not going to find a whole lot of people around. But um, most people can find, at least I think, in a general population, you should at least be able to find three.
Yeah. Well,
Three
and
people you vibe with.
yeah. Well, and you surround yourself with the people who are like minded or feel like you do. But
Yeah.
I agree with the whole isolation thing. I know when I came back from deployment, I would for a long time sit in my room with the shades pulled down, and I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to be around
Yeah.
anybody, and
Yeah.
it wasn't healthy. But you have to be around the right people for you, otherwise that's not healthy either. Totally get it. Well,
Yeah.
well, I want to. So as we wrap up our conversation today, was there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to cover? Would be my second to last question before I ask my final question.
Um, yeah. Going back to the communities thing, it's to anybody that would be listening to this, is the other community that I've helped build here was the veterans and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that building those type of communities, not just for myself, but for other people, and then giving people access to those communities. Like I always tell people, I'm like, my network's your network. Like, if you need something, and I know somebody that can help you, I will help you, type of thing.
Mhm.
And um, I've always found that to be very valuable. That's why, I've been people want to see you succeed, and you want to see them succeed, type of thing. But yeah, so the I used to work for this group called Bunker Labs, and they recently, I was the city leader here in Austin for like 2.5 years.
Mhm.
They call them ambassadors. Um, that was a good program. It's through the IBMF, through University of Syracuse, and I've done work with them too. I went to they have an entrepreneurship boot camp they do Texas A&M does it twice a year now.
Mhm.
But if you want to start a business, you can go, like, sign up for that and get into that program. But Bunker Labs is more of a community within the city type of thing, and it was a really good opportunity to meet other vets. And Austin's becoming a big, because Futures Labs here, Army Futures Labs, Navy, whatever the hell Navy calls their Futures Lab, and then AFWorks, which is basically the Air Force Future Labs.
Uh-huh.
They're all here now. So we have a pretty strong military presence. And then Cavazos isn't very far. And then San Antonio has Air Force and some other stuff down there, and cybersecurity and all that shit. So, um, but yeah, it's it's one of those things, like, I feel like when a lot of these people do isolate after they get out of the military, it's because they probably don't. I think I'm guilty of the same thing. Like I kind of hit that low hanging fruit of like, where am I going to find my community? And then you get a little disillusioned because But I did find like there's a group called Mission Continues, which they do like community service stuff and then
Yeah.
Team Rubicon and stuff. I found those groups you find a lot of you start finding really good vets. And I did some work with all of them. But yeah, it's very it's a process, very
Yeah.
time consuming process. But yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well, one last question, and before we go, and that is, for someone who's listening to this story years from now, maybe even when you and I aren't around anymore, what message would you have for them, or what lesson would you like them to take away from our conversation and how you've lived your life?
Um, Probably the first thing I'd say is don't eat yellow snow. Um, um, no, I think that um, I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, especially being in the military, doing psychedelic medicine and stuff like that, and going through the experiences of that I've had to is, I feel like ultimately we're all doing the best we can with the fucking cards we're dealt.
Right.
you know, and sometimes our best sucks. It does, you know, and to this day, it still sucks sometimes. And I'll tell you a quick story about my weekend. Um, my friend met me at the bar and I don't know if she had been slipped something before or at the bar, but she almost died in my arms.
Wow.
And had we not, we called 911, but my friends, I don't know, it's really weird. About about a year ago, my friends and I, or my girlfriend and I, watched this documentary about fentanyl.
Hmm.
And after that, I went and got some Narcan, and I tried to carry them around. Well, I didn't have mine on me. My friend Ben did, and it was in his car, and like he had to run out there and go grab that to get, you know,
Wow.
to to save her life. Um, and it was one of those instances in life that I was that I came out on top.
Hmm.
you know, did my best. And
Right.
it really mattered. But still to this day, there's a lot of times where I'm not at my best. And I think for anybody listen to this is like, I guess if you anybody that's ever read the Four Agreements, the very first is not the very first one, but the third agreement, I think, is always do your best.
Hmm.
Be impeccable with your word, always do your best. And I can't remember the others off the top of my head. But anyway, that's actually the fourth agreement. But, I think most people are trying to do their best. Even those shitty leaders in the military.
Well, anywhere you go, you're going to find good and you're going to find bad, right?
Yep, I know. I
Yep.
know. Even,
So,
even the ones I didn't like so much, I still give them a little grace.
well, there you go. All right. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time out to sit and talk with me today.
Yeah, I appreciate
It's
it.
been a real honor.
Yeah, it really has. And yeah, definitely stay in touch.
Watching the story of one of our nation's heroes on Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving these stories for future generations.